Hi everybody, the last time you saw us, we were headed to jail for the rest of our lives. Then something even worse happened. Check out this comic book to get caught up in our story so far. The Super Top Secret Truth About Captain Underpants by Georgian Harold. Once upon a while ago, there was two cool kids named George and Harold. We'd a bomb pops. Me too. They had a really mean principal named Mr. Krupp. Blah, blah, blah and stuff. So they hypnotized him. You will obey us. Okay. You are now Captain Underpants. Groovy. Mr. Krupp really thought he was Captain Underpants, tra-la-la, and he got in lots of trouble. One time Dr. Diaper kidnapped him, ha ha ha, and George and Harold had to save him. Booyah! Bye-bye! I'm free! Rats! Another time he almost got ate up by some talking toilets. Yum yum, eat 'em up. And George and Harold had to save him again. Eat this! I'm a hero! And then this other time, a bunch of zombie nerds attacked. Captain Underpants drank some superpower juice, glug glug, and he got superpowers. Then he saved George and Harold. It's about time. Here's the worst part. Whenever Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, blah blah blah, snap, he turns into Captain Underpants, tra-la-la. And whenever Captain Underpants gets water on his head, splash, he turns back into Mr. Krupp, blah blah blah. So whatever you do, don't snap your fingers at Mr. Krupp. Seriously, dudes, ixnay on the napping, say, Pig Latin. And if you ever see Captain Underpants saving the world, hide the H2O. Pow! Quick, nobody pour water on his head. Treehouse Comics, Inc. Chapter 1, George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the right with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the left with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. When our last adventure ended, George and Harold were being escorted to jail. The police had discovered surveillance photos showing the two boys robbing a bank with Captain Underpants. Of course, we all know that George, Harold, and Captain Underpants were innocent. It was their evil twins who would rob that bank. But the police hadn't bothered to read the last book, so they really didn't know what was going on. All they knew was that George and Harold looked a lot like the two kids in the surveillance photos. So the cops yelled, "Freeze!" and grabbed George and Harold, then told the two boys of their terrible fate. Suddenly, a gigantic pair of robotic pants appeared from out of nowhere. The terrifying Tippy Tinkle trousers emerged from the zipper, zapped the cops with an ice ray, and chased George and Harold and their two pets, Crackers and Sulu, far into the cavernous depths of the lower right-hand corner of page 17. If you read our last epic novel, you know that this is how the story ended, but that's not how it was supposed to end. You see, Tippy and his giant ice ray zapping robotic trousers weren't supposed to be there at all. They had come from the future and rudely interrupted what was supposed to happen. Unfortunately for Tippy, the simple act of sending himself backwards through time would end up being a terrible, terrible mistake. A mistake that would ultimately lead to the destruction of our entire planet, more or less. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, The Banana Cream Pie Paradox. Time machines are awesome, there's no doubt about it, but they can also be very dangerous. It's possible that a person could go back in time and accidentally change one little thing, and that one teeny tiny itsy bitsy thing could profoundly affect the future. This is what scientists refer to as the banana cream pie paradox. The banana cream pie paradox. Please follow along with this handy instructions. Imagine, if you will, that a scientist from the year 2020 baked a banana cream pie using bananas that he harvested from his very own banana tree. Let's suppose now that the scientist took his banana cream pie into a machine which zapped him and the pie back into the year 1936. Now imagine that the scientist stepped out of his time machine and accidentally tripped, smashing his pie into the face of a lady sitting at a fancy garden party. Now suppose that the lady jumped up angrily, wiped a handful of gooey banana cream pie filling from her face, and threw it at the scientist. The scientist ducked, causing the banana goo to smack into the face of a gentleman standing nearby. Splat! A waitress pointed at the gentleman and laughed. The angry gentleman wiped the goo from his face and smushed it into the waitress's face. "Well," said the waitress, "I never been so insulted in all my life. You gotta get out more, lady. Nyuk, nyuk, nyuk," said a chubby bald guy. "Why don't you mind your own business, bird brain," said another man. as he poked the chubby bald guy in the eyes. The chubby bald guy fell backwards and landed on the scientist's banana tree, which was just a tiny sapling in 1936. The tiny banana tree snapped in half and died. Now, if the scientist's banana tree died in 1936, it could never grow up and produce bananas. Therefore, the scientist would not have had the main ingredient he used to make his banana cream pie in the year 2020. Consequently, the banana cream pie could not exist. Tell that to these guys! Many scientists throughout the centuries have pondered the banana cream pie paradox, have come to the conclusion that people should be really careful when they use time machines, because one simple change in the past could affect the future, and even possibly destroy our entire planet. Chapter 3, the real ending to our last adventure. As we already saw in Chapter 1, George and Harold were being taken to jail when Tippy Trousers traveled backwards through time and interfered. But what would have happened if he hadn't showed up? What was supposed to happen before Tippy so rudely interrupted them? Well, sit back and get comfortable, because you're about to find out. The police chief and his right-hand man, Officer McWiggly, handcuffed George and Harold and shuffled them into the back of the police car. "You've got the wrong guys," cried Harold. "We didn't rob that bank." "It's true," said George. "That bank was robbed by our evil twins from an alternate universe." "Yeah, right," said Officer McWiggly. "If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that excuse." On the way to jail, the cops drove past Mr. Krupp, who was busy cleaning up the soggy toilet paper in his yard. "Hey," shouted the police chief, "that's a guy who robbed the bank with those kids." "Let's get him," yelled Officer McWiggly. "The times and stuff. Guilty." The cop slammed on the brakes, grabbed Mr. Krupp, handcuffed him, and threw him into the back seat of the car along with George and Harold. The trials lasted for nearly a year, and George, Harold, and Mr. Krupp were all found guilty. They were each sentenced to 10 years of incarceration. This unusually harsh sentence was tough on George and Harold, but it was really hard on Mr. Krupp. Chapter 4, Life in the Big House. Poor Mr. Krupp. He had been locked up at the Pico State Penitentiary for months, and the life of the jailbird just wasn't his thing. All day long, he had people bossing him around. He ate nutritionally deficient, horrible-tasting meals in a filthy cafeteria. He got bullied constantly by a bunch of meat-headed thugs, and he spent his days doing menial busy work in an overcrowded, poorly ventilated sweatshop. Mr. Krupp was told when to eat, when to read, and when to exercise. He even had to ask permission to go to the bathroom. He was constantly bombarded with pointless rules, ridiculous discipline, random searches, metal detectors, security cameras, and pharmaceuticals designed to make everyone compliant and docile. It was a lot like being a student at Jerome Horwitz Elementary School, except that the prison had better funding. "No peeking! Nothing to see here! Mind your own beeswax! Keep out!" Mr. Krupp grumbled angrily to himself as he stomped around the prison courtyard on a gloomy autumn afternoon. In the center of the courtyard, a giant green tarp shielded everyone's eyes from something large and tall that was being built in honor of the Pico State Penitentiary's upcoming 10-year anniversary. Everyone assumed it was some kind of statue, but since nobody had seen this top-secret project, not even the warden, nobody was quite sure what it was. "I'm sick of this place," Mr. Krupp muttered to himself. "Everybody's always telling me what to do. If one more person gives me another order, I think I'm going to go crazy." "Hey, fatty," shouted a tiny inmate working behind the green tarp. "Give me that hammer over there." Mr. Krupp clenched his fist furiously. "You can't tell me what to do," he screamed. "You're a prisoner just like I am." "I most certainly am nothing like you," said the tiny prisoner. It was Tippy Trousers, who was serving an 8-year sentence for attempting to take over the planet with intent to enslave humanity. Mr. Krupp rolled up his sweaty sleeves and stomped over to the pint-sized prisoner. He eyed Tippy up and down. Tippy eyed Mr. Krupp down and up. "Hey!" Mr. Krupp shouted. "You look kind of familiar." "I agree," said Tippy, "but I can't quite remember where I've seen you before." The two men walked in slow circles around each other. "Well, whoever you are," Mr. Krupp shouted, "you've got no business bossing me around." "I'll have you know," said Tippy, "that I'm more than just a regular prisoner. I'm an artiste. I was handpicked to build a statue by Varden Schmarden." Suddenly, a rotund little man peeped his bulbous, dandruff-speckled head out from behind the green tarp. "Did somebody just say my name?" he asked excitedly. "It was Warden Gordon B. Schmorden, the guardian and chief jailer of Pico State Penitentiary. Warden Schmorden was known far and wide for his cruelty and strictness. He once sentenced a prisoner to a year of solitary confinement just for ending a sentence with a preposition. Warden Schmorden was undoubtedly the most maniacally evil person anyone had ever met, but the injurious jailer had one fatal weakness. He was easily flattered, and that weakness was exactly what Tippy Tinkle-Trousers needed to talk his way into making a giant statue of Warden Gordon Schmorden to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of the Pico State Penitentiary. "Just leave everything to me," said Tippy at the start of the project, "and I'll construct the most stunningly handsome statue you've ever seen." "Really?" said the warden. "Can you make it extra tall and extra handsome?" "Of course," said Tippy. "Wonderful! Wonderful!" cried Warden Schmorden. "How soon can you get started?" "As soon as I get my supplies," said Tippy. He handed the warden a carefully written list of tools and materials. "Hey," said Warden Schmorden, looking over the list, "why do most of these supplies come from the mad scientist mini-mall? What do you need an emulsifying salsiflange inhibitor for? And what kind of a statue uses a reverse symbobulating tractomcfractionalizer?" "You know," said Tippy, "I don't tell you how to run your prison, so don't tell me how to build my statues." "Fair enough," said Warden Schmorden. Chapter 5, The Unveiling. One brisk evening in late October, the entire prison was yawning with excitement. The prisoners had all gathered in the bleachers under a clear moonlit sky as the prison band played a slow, reverent, and deeply moving rendition of Whoop, There It Is. After everyone dried their eyes, Warden Gordon Schmorden stepped onto the stage to congratulate himself. He proudly bragged about his great humility, confessed his intense hatred of intolerant people, and spoke for hours about his legendary brevity. Then the moment of truth arrived. Tippy Tinkle-Trousers' statue was finally ready to be shown to the world. With great theatrical flair, Tippy proudly strutted to the courtyard and grabbed hold of the green tarp. "Gentlemen," he announced, "it gives me great pleasure to get the heck out of here." Tippy pulled on the tarp and revealed his creation. "Hey!" shouted Warden Gordon Schmorden, "that statue doesn't have a head." "It's not a statue," yelled Tippy as he climbed a tall ladder up to the cockpit on top. "It's a giant robo-suit, and after I escape from this horrible prison, I'm going to put an end to that nonsensical nuisance, Captain Underpants." Tippy wiggled into the tiny cockpit and started up the engines. Suddenly, the colossal contraption came to life. Its mighty chest heaved as its gigantic gorilla-like arms swayed threateningly. "Sound the alarm!" screamed Warden Schmorden. "Stop that guy!" Armed guards ran in every direction while sirens wailed and prisoners screamed for their lives. Massive searchlights swept across the sky as the metallic behemoth took its first thunderous steps toward freedom. Suddenly, Tippy stopped and thought for a moment. Hey, I know where I saw that guy before," he said. Tippy searched the crowds of panicking prisoners until he found the one that he was looking for. The giant hand of Tippy's robosuit reached down and plucked Mr. Krupp from the crowd. "I knew I recognized you from somewhere," said Tippy. "You're the principal of that school I shrank last year." "Oh, yeah," said Mr. Krupp. "I remember you now. You're that Professor Poopy Pants guy." "My name is not Professor Poopy Pants," screamed the angry villain. That was a ridiculous name, so I changed it to Tippy Tinkle-Trousers." "Gee, that's a lot better," said Mr. Krupp sarcastically. Tippy glared into Mr. Krupp's defiant eyes. "I shall ignore your impudence on one condition," Tippy said. "Tell me where I can find George Beard and Harold Hutchins." "George and Harold?" asked Mr. Krupp, as he dangled precariously from Tippy's giant robotic fingertips. "What do you want with those two?" "Those boys have something to do with Captain Underpants," said Tippy. "I've seen them out together. They know each other. I'm sure of it." "Well, they should be pretty easy to find," said Mr. Krupp. "They're both locked up at the Pico Juvenile Detention Center." "They're in juvie, eh?" said Tippy with a sinister smirk. "Then that's where we're gonna go." Tippy clutched Mr. Krupp tightly in his robotic fist as he stomped forwards, crushing the armored watchtower and smashing through cell block B. "Freeze or we'll shoot!" shouted the guards. How about if I shoot and you freeze, said Tippy as he pressed a button on his control panel, causing a giant door in the chest of his robosuit to swing open. A massive laser shooter poked out from the mechanical depths of the robosuit and zapped the armed guards. Suddenly, they were transformed into frozen statues. What did you just do? Screamed Mr. Krupp hysterically. Oh, relax, said Tippy. It's just my Freezy Beam 4000. It temporarily freezes whatever it zaps for as long as I choose. Those guards will start out in about 10 minutes and they'll be perfectly fine. Tippy's heaving mechanical monstrosity thundered through the prison parking lot, battering buses and crushing cars as it headed toward the Pico Juvenile Detention Center. I just don't get it, said Mr. Krupp. What's so important about Captain Underpants? That ridiculous superhero followed my plot to take over the planet and enslave humanity, shouted Tippy. He's the reason I got locked up. Everybody knows that, said Mr. Krupp. But what's going to stop him from defeating you again? Oh, don't you worry your sweaty little head about that, said Tippy. I've got a few tricks up my sleeves this time. Chapter 6, Calling Captain Underpants. Meanwhile, across town at the Pico Juvenile Detention Center, George and Harold were getting ready for bed. You know, said George, I don't really mind being stuck here in juvie. Yeah, said Harold, it's not much different from our school, except that they have library books here, and a music teacher, said George, and an art teacher, said Harold. As the two boys discussed the similarities between elementary school and forced confinement in a harsh authoritarian penal institute, they heard the sounds of booming footsteps getting louder and louder. Soon their entire building began to shake violently with each thundering stride. George and Harold dashed to their windows and saw Tippy's terrifying robo-suit stomping toward them, freezing anyone and everything that stood in its way. Oh no! Screamed Harold. We're doomed! Tippy stopped at the main entrance to the center and demanded to speak with whoever was in charge. After a few minutes, the center's administrator, Director Hector Schmechter, showed up nervously at the door. Said Director Schmechter. May I help you? Do you have two kids in there named George Baird and Harold Hutchins? Shouted Tippy. Yeah, said Director Schmechter. Those two kids are nothing but trouble. They're always pulling pranks, too. I mean, you can't sit on a toilet around here without getting ketchup sprayed in your underwear. And last week they— Just hand them over, Tippy interrupted. Hey, no prob, Director Schmechter chuckled, trying to sound cool. Director Hector Schmechter pranced excitedly to George and Harold's cell, grabbed them by the arms, and escorted them to the front door. This'll teach you for putting hair remover in my shampoo, said Director Schmechter. Hector tossed the boys outside and locked the door. George and Harold stood trembling before Tippy's massive robosuit as the crazed inventor chuckled menacingly. Hello, George and Harold, cried Tippy. Remember me? The boys were too frightened to speak. Hey, Tippy, said Mr. Krupp, you don't need me anymore, do you? I mean, I told you where you could find the brats, right? You can let me go now, right? I guess so, said Tippy. He set Mr. Krupp down on the ground by George and Harold. Ha! Mr. Krupp laughed. I never thought I'd be happy to see you two kids again. You bubs are in big trouble now. Almost without thinking, George and Harold reached out their hands and snapped their fingers. Snap! Snap! Suddenly, a ridiculously optimistic smile spread across Mr. Krupp's face. Hey, cried Tippy, what's going on down there? What George and Harold knew and what Tippy was about to discover was that Mr. Krupp was transforming into the world's greatest superhero, Captain Underpants. Quickly, he wiggled out of his purple prison jumpsuit, flipped his shoes away, and peeled off his sweaty toupee. The only thing missing was his cape. He looked around the detention center but couldn't find anything suitable. I can't be a superhero without a cape, said Captain Underpants. You're okay, George assured him. Yeah, said Harold, you don't need a cape, seriously. Sorry, said the captain, but you gotta look fine if you're gonna fight crime. And with no time to spare, Captain Underpants flew off to find a cape. That guy was Captain Underpants, cried Tippy. Doyee, said George. Ah, screamed Tippy. I just had him in my hand. I could have crushed him. Again, George responded with the only intelligent word that could possibly be applied in such a situation. Doyee. Meanwhile, Captain Underpants had flown to a nearby shopping center, which was having its semi-annual lazy storytelling sale. Quick, cried Captain Underpants, do you guys sell superhero capes? You betcha, said the employee cheerfully. They're in aisle 2039, between the diaries and the wizard hats. Awesome! Cried Captain Underpants. In no time at all, our hero found a cape, tied around his neck, and flew off into the night to face his mortal enemy. Chapter 7, Tippy's Trouser Troubles. Meanwhile, back at the Pico Juvenile Detention Center, Tippy Tinkle Trousers was in a tizzy. He grabbed Georgian Harold in his mighty robotic hands and demanded some answers. "Tell me everything you know about Captain Underpants," grinned Tippy, "or I'll squish you kids like a couple of blueberries." "Well," said George, "he's really strong." "And," said Harold, "he's really powerful." Yes, said Tippy. "What else is he?" "He's right behind you," said George and Harold simultaneously. Tippy turned quickly, but not quickly enough. Captain Underpants swung his flabby fist and bashed Tippy right in the jaw. Pow! The force of the blow sent Tippy's robo-suit flying over the top of the Juvenile Detention Center and into one of Pico's many downtown skyscrapers. George and Harold flew from the grip of Tippy's robo-fist and landed safely in some nearby bushes. "I'll kill you," screamed Tippy as he pulled himself up and lunged at Captain Underpants. The chest panel of the robo-suit flipped open and a brilliant burst of energy from the Freezy Beam 4000 shot out at the waistband warrior. But Captain Underpants was too quick. He zipped and zinged, expertly avoiding every frozen energy beam that burst from the belly of the beastly robo-suit. "Oh, Tippy," called Captain Underpants as he sat coyly atop a nearby skyscraper. "I'm up here." Tippy turned quickly and zapped his Freezy Beam 4000 at the skyscraper, covering it with a thick casing of ice. But Captain Underpants had been too fast. He had zinged away just in time. Zing! Captain Underpants flew several blocks away to the swing set at the playground of Jerome Horwitz Elementary School. Robo-Tippy ran after him. "Yoo-hoo, Tippy-Tip," Captain Underpants sang as he swung playfully from a swing. "Will you give me a push?" Tippy leaped over the school and landed in the football field. He had zapped his Freezy Beam 4000 again, this time covering the swing set with a thick coating of ice. But again, Captain Underpants had zanged away just in time. Zang! "Here, Tippy, Tippy, Tippy," called Captain Underpants again as he lounged lazily between Tippy's giant robotic feet. "I'm down here now. Could I have some ice, please?" "Why, you little," screamed Tippy as he bent over and zapped his Freezy Beam 4000 down between his feet. Of course, Captain Underpants was long gone before the ice beam reached the ground. Unfortunately for Tippy, however, his robo-feet weren't. Tippy's giant robo-feet and robo-legs are now encased in a huge shimmering iceberg. He pulled with all his might, but his whole lower half was frozen to the football field. Tippy was stuck. Chapter 8, Break-In 2, Electric Boogaloo. "No!" screamed Tippy. He ducked his head beneath the cockpit of the robo-suit and disappeared down a stairwell into the intricate innards of his intimidating invention. Captain Underpants grabbed the arms of the robo-suit and began to pull. Harder and harder he tugged until, one by one, the rivets in the robo-suit's thick steel belt began to pop. The harder Captain Underpants yanked, the more the robo-suit began to break in two. The shrieking sounds of twisting metal reverberated around Tippy as he traversed the crumbling staircase. His only chance was to make it down to the lower half of the robo-suit before Captain Underpants pulled it apart. Clank! With no time to spare, Tippy dashed into the robo-pants just as the robo-suit broke in two. "You haven't seen the last of me," Tippy yelled as he closed the emergency hatch on the robo-pants. Then Tippy set his Tinkle Time Travelometer to 5 years ago and pressed the "Away we go" button. Suddenly, sparks of blue lightning began emanating from the robo-pants. The massive bolts crackled loudly and grew more and more intense until finally, Tippy and his robo-pants were enveloped in a giant ball of blue lightning. A blinding flash turned the night sky into day for a sliver of a second, and then it was all over. Tippy and his robo-pants had disappeared, leaving only an empty mound of ice behind. The crazed inventor and his terrifying trousers would never be seen again after that night. They would, however, be seen exactly 5 years before that night. But before I can tell you that story, we have to go back even further.